The Taraxian hegemony had spent 3 millennia cataloging every species capable of ending civilizations, and the Korthak held the undisputed #1 spot. These weren't your garden variety apex predators. Oh no, the universe had to get creative with this particular nightmare. Standing 12 feet tall on 4 legs that could crush titanium, sporting natural armor that made battleship hulls look like tissue paper, and wielding claws that could carve through quantum-reinforced steel like butter, the Korthak were essentially biological weapons wrapped in an attitude problem. Their homeworld of Korthak Prime existed in a permanent state of barely controlled chaos, where the local wildlife included things that would make a Terran T-Rex file a restraining order. The planet's gravity was 3 times standard, its atmosphere was 70% more dense than comfortable, and somehow the Korthak had made it their personal playground. They'd conquered 17 star systems before lunch on most Tuesdays, and their idea of diplomacy usually involved demonstrating exactly how many ways they could dismantle your spacecraft while you were still inside it. Yet here was the galaxy's most delicious irony: these living engines of destruction had developed an inexplicable fondness for leaving their most precious possessions, their young, in the care of humanity. Yes, humanity. The same species that most of the galaxy considered barely evolved enough to operate door handles without supervision. Zara Okafor adjusted her tool belt with the casual air of someone who'd long since stopped finding absurdity surprising, which was probably a job requirement when your daily routine involved preventing small creatures capable of accidentally demolishing city blocks from eating each other's homework. The sign outside her facility read Little Claws Developmental Center in 17 languages, though the Korthak translation roughly meant place where small ones learn not to accidentally destroy everything they touch. The morning had started typically enough. 3 Korthak younglings had gotten into what humans would charitably call a disagreement over breakfast, which had resulted in a small crater where the dining area used to be. Zara had calmly redirected their energy toward constructive activities, like learning to use their natural plasma generation abilities for art projects instead of property damage. The resulting sculptures were either breathtaking abstract masterpieces or evidence of war crimes, depending on your aesthetic preferences. "Crix, darling, we've talked about this," Zara said, addressing a youngling roughly the size of a small elephant who was currently trying to melt through the reinforced floor with concentrated enthusiasm. "Plasma breath is for outside activities only." The creature, adorable in the way that baby tigers are adorable right before they grow up to be apex predators, looked up with eyes that could have powered small suns and made a sound that might have been an apology or possibly a threat. With Korthak young, the distinction was often academic. Dr. Millicent Thornburg, the facility's resident xenobiologist, observed this interaction with the fascinated horror of someone who'd spent 20 years studying theoretical alien behavior and was still processing the reality of it. The metabolic energy required for those plasma bursts should theoretically exhaust a creature that size within minutes, she muttered, scribbling notes on her quantum tablet. "Theory's lovely," Zara replied, casually stepping around a small patch of floor that was still glowing cherry red. "Reality's messier. Crix here can keep that up for about 6 hours if properly motivated. Can't you, sweetheart?" The youngling's response involved what could generously be described as a purr, if purrs typically registered on seismic equipment. The communication panel chose that moment to emit the specific tone that meant someone, somewhere, was about to ruin Zara's day. The holographic display flickered to life, revealing Commander Vexhai of the Galactic Peacekeepers, whose reptilian features were currently arranged in an expression of barely controlled panic. "Miss Okafor," the commander began, his voice carrying the weight of someone delivering news that could start interstellar wars. "We have a situation. 7 Korthak younglings have been reported missing from human care facilities across 3 systems. Their parents are concerned." Zara blinked. In her experience, when Korthak parents became concerned, small moons occasionally developed structural problems. "Missing how?" "That's what we intend to find out. A full investigation team is en route to your facility." The connection terminated, leaving Zara staring at the blank display while Dr. Thornburg made strangled noises that suggested her theoretical framework was experiencing rapid catastrophic failure. 7 missing Korthak young, Thornburg whispered. Do you understand what this means? If humans have harmed them, the Korthak won't just declare war, they'll declare a crusade. They'll glass every human world until the stars burn cold. Zara, meanwhile, was checking her scheduling tablet with the expression of someone solving a mildly interesting puzzle. 7 missing. Across 3 systems. She paused, consulting what appeared to be a standard administrative calendar. Oh, well, that explains it. Explains what exactly? They're not missing, Millicent. They're on a field trip. The investigation team arrived with the subtle fanfare of a small invasion. Commander Vexhai led the charge, followed by a diverse collection of species representatives who'd apparently drawn the short straw on potentially civilization-ending diplomatic incidents. They moved through the facility with the careful precision of bomb disposal experts, which wasn't entirely inaccurate given the circumstances. Behind them trailed a collection of recording equipment, translation matrices, and what appeared to be several different types of emergency medical devices. The team's cetacean representative was already composing what looked suspiciously like a last will and testament. Where are they? Commander Vexhai demanded, his claws extending slightly in a display that would have sent most species diving for cover. Zara glanced up from where she was helping a youngling named Thex learn to control the intensity of his natural bioluminescence. Where are who? The missing Korthak young. 7 of them. Gone from human facilities. Oh, those 7. They're at the Kepler Station Marine Biology Center learning about Earth's ocean ecosystems. Should be back Thursday. The silence that followed could have been bottled and sold as a recreational drug for species that enjoyed existential confusion. Dr. Thornburg cleared her throat. Perhaps we should explain the context. The context, interrupted Commander Vexhai, his voice rising to frequencies that made the facility's quantum-stabilized windows vibrate, is that the most dangerous species in known space entrusts their offspring to humans, and now those offspring are missing. The context is that we are potentially looking at the end of human civilization as we know it. Zara considered this assessment with the thoughtful air of someone evaluating whether to have tea or coffee with lunch. Well, when you put it like that, I suppose it does sound concerning. But they're not missing, they're learning. There's a difference. She activated her communication panel, and within seconds a cheerful holographic display showed 7 Korthak younglings apparently having the time of their lives in what appeared to be an enormous aquatic habitat. They were swimming alongside creatures that looked like a delightful cross between dolphins and small whales, their natural plasma generation creating spectacular light shows in the water. You see, Zara continued conversationally, Korthak young are naturally curious about other ecosystems. Their homeworld is all lava and crystalline formations, very beautiful but limited biodiversity, so we arrange educational exchanges. This particular group requested to study aquatic life forms. The investigation team stared at the display, watching as one of the younglings' creatures that could theoretically level city blocks gently nuzzled what appeared to be a Earth-based sea turtle with the tender care of a devoted pet owner. How? Whispered the team's arachnoid representative. Is this possible? The question hung in the air like an unsolved equation, begging for an answer that defied everything the galaxy thought it knew about interspecies relations, biological imperatives, and the fundamental nature of power. Zara settled into her explanation with the comfortable rhythm of someone who'd had this conversation before, though never with quite such a distinguished audience. It started about 15 years ago with a human named Marcus Chen. He was a xenoarchaeologist working on Korthak Prime, cataloging their ancient sites. Completely harmless fellow, couldn't have intimidated a particularly aggressive houseplant. Dr. Thornburg activated her recording equipment, recognizing a potentially paradigm-shifting moment when she saw one. Marcus was working near a nesting ground when he encountered a group of Korthak young who'd become separated from their guardians during a territorial dispute between adults. Now any sensible person would have contacted authorities and maintained a safe distance. Marcus, however, was not particularly sensible. The holographic display shifted, showing archived footage of a slight human male surrounded by creatures that dwarfed him by several orders of magnitude, all of them apparently competing for his attention. He fed them, Zara continued. Not food. Korthak young don't eat solid matter for their first 3 years. They absorb energy directly through specialized organs. Marcus somehow figured out how to modulate his bioelectric field to provide the specific frequency they needed. Commander Vexhi's claws retracted slightly. He fed them from his own life force, more or less. But here's the interesting part. Humans apparently generate bioelectric patterns that Korthak young find not just nourishing but calming. Our neural activity, our emotional states, even our sleep patterns create a resonance that helps regulate their development. The investigation team exchanged glances that suggested their understanding of galactic power dynamics was undergoing rapid reorganization. Within a week, Zara continued, those young had essentially adopted Marcus. When their parents finally tracked them down, they found them curled up around him like he was their personal heating unit, all of them healthier and more developed than Korthak young typically are at that age. She gestured toward her current charges, who were indeed clustered around the human staff members with obvious contentment. It turns out, Dr. Thornburg interjected, her scientific training finally catching up with the implications that human emotional complexity provides something that Korthak young need for proper psychological development. Our capacity for what other species consider contradictory emotions, love and frustration, protectiveness and exasperation, joy and exhaustion, creates a neural environment that accelerates their cognitive growth. You're telling us, said Commander Vexhi slowly, that the most dangerous species in the galaxy trusts humans with their young because humans are emotionally complicated. Essentially, yes. The silence that followed was profound enough that several philosophical schools would later date their foundational principles to this exact moment. HFY, an adult Korthak who stood nearly 15 feet tall and radiated the kind of presence that made gravitational fields seem inadequate, materialized in the facility's main entrance with the fluid grace of something that had never encountered an obstacle it couldn't simply walk through. His arrival should have sent every non-Korthak in the facility diving for emergency shelters. Instead, 3 younglings immediately rushed toward him with obvious delight, chattering in frequencies that made the translation equipment emit small puffs of smoke. Parent HFY, Zara said warmly. Perfect timing. Your little ones have had quite an adventure today. The massive creature lowered his great head toward Zara with obvious affection, a gesture that would have looked threatening if not for the gentle rumbling sound that accompanied it, the Korthak equivalent of a contented sigh. The investigation team was just learning about our arrangement, Zara continued, as if having a casual conversation with a living weapon of mass destruction was the most normal thing in the universe. HFY regarded the cowering investigators with what might have been amusement. When he spoke, his voice resonated through multiple frequency ranges, requiring the translation equipment to work overtime. Human friend Zara teaches my offspring patience, creativity and emotional regulation, the translation rendered. Under her guidance, they have learned to channel their natural abilities constructively rather than destructively. This is more valuable than all the military training in the hegemony. But why humans? Commander Vexhi managed. Why not your own species? HFY's response came with what the translator identified as harmonics, indicating gentle humor. Adult Korthak are optimized for survival and conquest. We excel at destruction, territoriality and resource acquisition. These traits, while valuable, do not nurture the complex emotional intelligence that our young require for true maturity. He gestured toward Zara with one massive claw that could have bisected a starship. Humans, however, are naturally inclined toward nurturing behaviors, even toward species not their own. They possess an intuitive understanding of growth, development, and the patience required for teaching. Most importantly, they do not fear our young, they simply see them as children who need guidance. Dr. Thornburg was scribbling notes furiously. The psychological profile makes sense. Humans evolved as social creatures with extended childhood periods. We're biologically programmed to invest enormous resources in child-rearing, often for individuals not genetically related to us. Plus, Zara added with a grin, We're apparently too dense to be properly terrified of them, which it turns out, is exactly what they need. The investigation team was beginning to look like individuals experiencing rapid cognitive restructuring. The arachnoid representative appeared to be having what might charitably be called an existential crisis. So when Korthak parents say their children are in human care, Commander Vex High said slowly, they're not being conquered or dominated, they're being educated. The finest education in the galaxy, HFY confirmed. Our young returned to us with skills no Korthak facility could provide: emotional intelligence, creative problem solving, and most importantly, the ability to choose when not to use their natural capabilities. As if to demonstrate this point, young Crix approached the investigation team with obvious curiosity. Instead of the casual destruction that might be expected from a creature of his capabilities, he simply settled nearby and began generating a soft, harmless light show that cast dancing patterns on the walls. Beautiful, isn't it? Zara said. Last month he would have accidentally melted through 3 floors trying to produce that effect. Now he can modulate his plasma generation with artistic precision. The implications were staggering. The galaxy's most feared species wasn't just tolerating human influence on their young, they were actively seeking it out, recognizing that human caregivers could provide something that their own advanced civilization couldn't. How many facilities like this exist? Commander Vex High asked, his voice carrying the weight of someone whose entire worldview was undergoing reconstruction. 47 at last count, Dr. Thornburg replied. Across 12 star systems, each one staffed primarily by human caregivers, with waiting lists stretching decades into the future. Waiting lists? Oh yes, Zara confirmed. Korthak parents compete intensively for placement in human facilities. It's considered the highest honor their society can bestow, having their children accepted into human care programs. The investigation team stood in stunned silence, processing the revelation that what they'd assumed was evidence of human subjugation was actually a privilege that the galaxy's apex predators fought each other to obtain. HFY's offspring had begun demonstrating various skills they'd learned under human tutelage: controlled energy manipulation, cooperative problem solving, and what appeared to be the Korthak equivalent of artistic expression. Each display was a masterpiece of restrained power, channeled through the kind of emotional sophistication that would have been impossible without human influence. The irony, Dr. Thornburg observed, is that humanity's supposed weakness, our emotional complexity, our tendency toward nurturing behaviors, our inability to be properly intimidated, has become our greatest strategic asset. Commander Vex High was composing what would later become one of the most significant diplomatic reports in galactic history. So when we ask why the most dangerous species trusts humans with their young, the answer, Zara finished, watching as Crix successfully created a plasma sculpture that bore a striking resemblance to the Earth's solar system, is that we're the only species foolish enough to see baby monsters and think children who need guidance instead of threats to be contained. The investigation team departed with expressions suggesting they'd need significant time to process what they'd witnessed. Their report would eventually reshape galactic politics, though none of them realized it at the time. As the facility settled back into its routine, Zara reflected on the beautiful absurdity of it all. The galaxy's power structures were built on the assumption that strength dominated weakness, that advanced civilizations naturally conquered primitive ones, and that evolutionary fitness determined hierarchical position. But here they were, living proof that sometimes the universe preferred a different kind of logic entirely. The most dangerous species in known space had voluntarily placed their most precious possessions into the care of creatures they could destroy without effort, recognizing that true strength sometimes meant knowing when to be gentle. The Korthak young continued their afternoon activities, their natural abilities channeled through human-taught emotional intelligence into something approaching art. Their plasma generation created cascading light shows that rivaled any sunset, their strength was applied to careful construction projects, and their natural aggression had been transformed into competitive games that hurt no one. Zara smiled, watching Thex successfully demonstrate the controlled bioluminescence he'd been practicing. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new lessons, and probably at least one incident requiring the facility's insurance adjusters to update their risk assessment algorithms. But tonight, The most dangerous children in the galaxy would fall asleep surrounded by humans who saw them not as weapons or threats, but simply as youngsters who needed someone to help them grow into the best version of themselves. And somewhere in the cosmic accounting system that governed interstellar relations, humanity had just discovered that their greatest weakness might actually be their most devastating strength, the ability to look at the universe as nightmares and see instead someone's beloved children in need of a good education.